All right, today we're setting sail with one of the most famous travelers in all of literature, Lemuel Gulliver. But here's the thing, this isn't really a story about discovering new lands. It's about a journey into the weird and, frankly, pretty ugly parts of humanity. Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels might look like a kid's book on the shelf, but don't let that fool you. This is one of the most savage and brilliant satires ever put to paper. And it all starts with this one big question. What if all the things we take so seriously, our politics, our wars, our social status, what if all of it is basically just a game for children? What if, from another point of view, it all looks completely ridiculous? Well, that is exactly the uncomfortable spot Swift wants to put us in. So here's our game plan. We're going to follow Gulliver's 4 big voyages. We'll start with the man who wrote the book. Then we'll see our world get shrunk down to the size of a dollhouse, and then blown up under a giant microscope. After that, we'll take a trip into the weird world of abstract ideas before we land somewhere that splits humanity into 2 extremes, pure reason and pure savagery. And finally, we'll get to the pretty devastating conclusion. Okay, first up, the satirist's voyage begins. We're meeting the man with the distorting mirror. See, before we get on the boat, we have to know who's steering the ship. Our narrator is this guy, Lemuel Gulliver, a regular ship's surgeon. But the real puppet master here, the one holding up that crazy mirror to us, is Jonathan Swift. And this really gets to the heart of what Swift was doing. He wasn't just writing an adventure. He was a master of satire. His whole idea was that if you just show people reality, they'll yawn and look away. But if you hold up a distorting mirror, one that makes things tiny or gigantic or just plain weird, you force them to actually see the ugliness they normally ignore. He was so frustrated because he believed humans were capable of reason, but instead, we constantly choose to be driven by pride and foolishness. All right, on to part 2, the view from above. This is Gulliver's first trip to the land of Lilliput, and it's like looking at the world through the wrong end of a telescope. His first shipwreck kicks off a journey where everything we think about power and importance gets flipped completely upside down. So boom, Gulliver washes up on a beach, and suddenly he's a giant. He's surrounded by people who are only 6 inches tall. They literally call him the Man Mountain. And right away, he and we get this incredible bird's eye view of a miniature version of our own world. And let me tell you, what he sees is something else. This is where Swift just lets loose. The biggest, most serious conflicts in Lilliput are just hilarious. You've got 2 political parties whose only real difference is that one wears high heels and the other wears low heels. Sound familiar? That's his jab at the Whigs and Tories in England. And even crazier, they're in a massive, deadly war with their neighbors over which end of a boiled egg you're supposed to crack. A war. He's basically shouting at us, look how stupid your own conflicts are. So you want to get ahead in Lilliput? Forget wisdom or experience. Nope. To get a high-ranking job, you have to compete in a tightrope dancing competition. Whoever can jump the highest without falling and breaking their neck gets the position. It's this scathing, brilliant takedown of the political games people played in court just to kiss up to the king. Okay, next section, under the microscope. For Voyage 2, we're off to Brobdingnag for a total worm's eye view. Swift completely flips the perspective. After seeing the world as a giant, Gulliver's about to find out what it's like to be the little guy. He ends up in Brobdingnag, a land of 60-foot-tall giants. And just like that, the tables are turned. He's not the Man Mountain anymore. Now he's just a curiosity, this small, dangerous animal that they treat like a little pet. You can just feel his human pride getting crushed. And from this tiny perspective, everything is magnified, and it's not pretty. When Gulliver looks at the skin of a beautiful giant woman, he doesn't see beauty. All he sees are giant pores, pimples, freckles. He's totally disgusted. Swift is showing us that our standards of beauty are really just a trick of scale. If you put any of us under a microscope, we'd all look like monsters. But even as a little speck, Gulliver's pride is still there. He gets a chance to talk to the king of Brobdingnag, and he starts bragging about Europe. He goes on and on about our laws, our wars, our politics, our money. He's totally expecting the king to be just amazed by how advanced we are. The king is not amazed. He is horrified. After listening to Gulliver's whole speech, he delivers this absolutely devastating line. He says he can't help but conclude that humanity is basically the most pernicious race of little odious vermin that nature ever suffered to crawl upon the surface of the earth. Ouch. Our greatest achievements to him just sound like the squabbling of insects. All right, let's move on. We've done big, we've done small. Now for Voyager 3, Swift takes aim at something else, the way we think. Part 4 is a kaleidoscope of folly. This is all about what happens when our brains get disconnected from the real world.
So Gulliver finds himself on Laputa, a floating island where the people have their heads, quite literally, in the clouds. They're so lost in abstract thoughts about math and music that they can't even function. Seriously, they need servants with little balloons on sticks called flappers to gently bonk them just to remind them to talk or listen. It's a hilarious critique of intellectuals who are too smart for their own good. Then, down on the ground, there's the Academy of Legato, and the scientists there are working on some real gems. They're trying to extract sunbeams from cucumbers. They're trying to turn human waste back into food. They're trying to build houses starting from the roof. It's Swift making fun of any kind of progress that's completely useless in the real world. And that brings us to the final and by far the most disturbing voyage. Section 5, Reason versus Savagery. We're heading to the land of the Huehumnims. This is the part of the journey that really, truly breaks Gulliver. So in this land, there are two main groups. First, you have the Huenums. They look like horses, but they are perfectly rational, logical, truthful beings. Their society is a peaceful utopia. Then you have the Yahoos. They're these filthy, violent, greedy, human-like creatures that are pure, raw animal instinct. The problem for Gulliver, he realizes that humans are this awful mix of the two. We have just enough reason to make our animal vices even more dangerous. And then comes the absolute moment of horror. Gulliver's looking at one of these disgusting yahoos, and he sees himself. He recognizes in this abominable creature the perfect human figure. And it just shatters him. In that single moment, he's forced to admit that at our core, we are yahoos. And that brings us to our final section, a race of odious vermin. This is all about the fallout, the final verdict on humanity, and what happens when Gulliver finally comes home. Because after seeing what he's seen, there's no going back. I mean, just track his mental journey here. He starts out as a proud Englishman. Then he becomes this amused tourist looking at tiny people. Then he becomes the disgusting little pet. Then he discovers this ideal of pure reason, and it just completely breaks his brain. It leads him to the final step. He becomes a full-on hater of humanity. The ending is actually really tragic. He's forced to go back to England, and he's so disgusted by people that he can't even be in the same room as his own family. He sees his wife and kids as nothing more than filthy yahoos. He ends up buying horses and spending all his time in the stable with them because they're the only things that remind him of the noble Huehumnims. But this right here is the real punchline of the whole book. Gulliver says that after everything, he can deal with humanity's flaws, the corruption, the disease, the ugliness, but the one thing he can't stand, the thing that breaks all the measures of my patience, is seeing this flawed, disgusting creature be so full of pride. And that's Swift's ultimate target. It's not just that we're yahoos, it's that we're yahoos who strut around thinking we're angels. So, in the end, Gulliver's Travels leaves us with this really uncomfortable question that's just as relevant today as it was 300 years ago. If some truly superior intelligence were to look down on our world, what would they think? Would they be impressed by our achievements? Or would they just see a bunch of vermin, totally deluded by their own pride? It's a tough question, and one we still have to answer for ourselves.